Okay then everyone, we're going to get started. This is a little bit of a shorter session than ones previously. It's going to be covering a couple of areas which overlaps from the previous session, but we'll go into it in a bit more detail. So today's session is all about how search engines work, and the schedule for today will break down into a few separate different areas. So search engines and their current market share across the United Kingdom, the search engine index and how that works, how the algorithms are formulated and created and how they work, crawling, indexing, and ranking. What's the difference? What are the different terminologies, and how can they affect you as a business? And why is my site not showing on Google, which is always a classic question that we get. And then easy steps to improve your indexing and to take some ownership of this yourselves. So first of all, we'll start off with the market share of the search engine market across the United Kingdom. So as many of you well know, Google is by far the winner right now, and it continues to gain market share as we push forward with more Android phones, which are pre-installed with Google's search engine. However, Bing, owned by Microsoft, is trying its hardest by whenever you update your Microsoft computer, Bing tries to default back to that search engine, but it also leads to nicely why the most popular search for on Bing is the word Google, because people still will go to Bing, search Google, go to Google, and then go from there. DuckDuckGo is a very privacy-conscious search engine, which I would certainly say is one to look out for. There's obviously Yahoo and MSN still hanging on just in there right now, but there are also ones out there which allow you to plant trees as you search. There's some really, really cool new search engines coming up, which are very privacy conscious and in theory, good for the world and good for individuals as well. A lot of those, however, follow the same principles as Google's own search algorithm and are very much trying to mimic it. As you would tell between looking at Bing and Google, they look very similar. And this is all part of the tactic to try to chip away at Google's market share right now. So the search engine index, which is basically a collection of web pages which are all put together into a massive file of facts. And each of those file of facts pages has one of those little widgets sticking out the side, which says this is what is in this area. And that is how Google can quickly access that information when you're searching for it and then display it to you. So there's very much a difference between what is the internet and what is Google's index of the internet. So Google's index will be stripping out certain low-level, low-quality websites, spammy websites. There is a large proportion of the web which is in the dark web, which is below, hidden way below Google's index, where you can buy all types of illegal paraphernalia, and that is a very active subworld of the internet. However, Google is trying to bring forward the best parts of the internet and make that accessible to people if people find it relevant. So the ranking algorithms themselves are designed to sort through hundreds of billions of web pages in a search engine index, and then to find the most relevant and useful results, typically in sub-seconds. And it's getting faster all of the time. The algorithm is not made up of one person's rules anymore. It's not defined by just one person sitting in the back of Google's office saying, hey, we're just going to change this. This is made up of thousands of validators who are constantly checking, whose jobs are to check Google's relevancy on their results and then make manual adjustments on search engine results. Thousands of A/B testing, hundreds of thousands of A/B testing scenarios where Google are trying different results with different people constantly. And what we are seeing is up to 3 or 4 changes to the algorithm every single day, and it's constantly moving as we go forward, which makes SEO a very difficult task to try to keep on top of, but ultimately a job which never ends up leaving you. And this is really important. So people need to stop seeing SEO as, hey, I'm just going to do this SEO campaign and then I'm going to stop. No, sadly, that's not the case anymore. It really shouldn't have been the case in the first place, but sadly, a lot of SEO companies kind of push that methodology of, hey, let's just do this short campaign and then all your SEO woes are gone. This needs to be ingrained into your everyday work life running a business. And this is exactly why. This one screen explains exactly that. which is it is moving at such a rate of knots that even Google are hiring SEOs to help optimize Google for Google. So it is a constantly moving target, and unless you are keeping your ear close to the ground, or you have a business or a agency working alongside you, a good agency who are keeping you informed of these changes, then you're going to always fall behind. So even after a 6-month campaign, you could end up losing your ground after the 6 to 8 months period as everybody else continues. So search engine algorithms have many, many factors, right? And the most important right now in 2020 and moving forward is the meaning of your query and the relevance of the web pages. We have covered this on a previous session, but I'm going to retouch on it again, which is the amount of individuals and businesses who pursue superficial vanity-led keywords instead of understanding the intent and the relevancy. So what people are doing is they're doing their keyword research and saying, hey, this search has 250,000 views. But what they don't realize is that by searching recruitment jobs, or let's say they're searching IT jobs, they might be a business looking for IT candidates. They might be a recruitment company trying to find people. They might be trying to find the average salary. And it's only after the 3rd or 4th search that people get to this really granular stage where the intent is on point and that person is going to transact. So the last thing you want to do is spend 6 to 12 months pursuing an SEO campaign against the wrong keywords, exactly because of this reason of not understanding relevancy and the meaning of the query at heart. Now, there's a couple of quick ways, just reflecting on a previous session that we had, those who didn't join us, that you can try to find this relevancy and you can find the meaning of your query. You could use a tool called alsoask.com, and you can go onto that website, put in a primary keyword like HDTV, and then it will spit out lots of long tail keywords and key phrases relating to that subject. And that is following Google's own AI system, which is built in to try to predict what somebody's going to search for, so that you can answer those questions before the person even is thinking about asking that question themselves. So the other factors that Google is looking at, as well as the other search engines, is how useful a page is. So once you are ranking visibly for a key phrase or a selection of key phrases, are people engaging with your website? Are they clicking through? Are they bouncing? So your aim here is to provide the most optimum user experience to get speed of access to the answers that your prospective customers might be asking before they even ask it. And once they're on your page, it's your job to keep them there for as long as you physically can, to keep their attention and to stop them bouncing back to the search engine and either clicking on a competitor or even worse, interacting and transacting with a competitor. So that means adding video content to your web pages. That means making a really fast user experience, specifically on mobile. Once again, related to a previous session, the amount of businesses who are building websites mobile desktop first rather than mobile first continues to be a trend in this world. And that's because it's so easy. While I'm sat at my computer to design a website, in reality, 70% of those people are coming at it from a mobile phone. So we should be building websites mobile first, which is one of the many factors and rules from which a search engine is looking at. And then finally, context as well is another massive one here. So for example, if I'm looking for windows and doors and I search replacement windows, Google's going to deliver me the most local relevant results for me, even if I don't type in my location. And this is Google's knowledge of understanding that people are more likely to transact at a local level with certain phrases and businesses compared to a national level where maybe conversion and click-through isn't quite as high over the years. So how does a search engine find websites? And this is all done historically by following links, which is why backlinks have been such a possibly over-focused in the SEO community for so long, because everybody is so focused on gaining large volume of backlinks rather than trying to create good quality, compelling content, which is relevant, useful, and timely for your customers and prospective customers. Now, backlinks are important, and why they're important is because Google operates its search engines as well as the other search engines with little spiders which crawl through the web following as many links as they possibly can. They analyze the text in that link. So if, for example, it's following the phrase click here, going through to a website, that website is actually accidentally optimizing for the word click here. And it's not very useful for Google's index, which is why Adobe ended up ranking top for many years when somebody searched click here on Google, because of the amount of people who click here to download this PDF in the history of the web. So when you're creating those links, it's really worth just remembering, if you didn't follow our basic SEO session, then you can watch that video back on the Nettle website. But yeah, just quickly touching on that again, is the link needs to be descriptive of the target. So if you're having links pointing through to you, they need to be descriptive of, this is the best laundrette in Bristol, or it needs to be, this butcher's does the best sausages in Birmingham. And that should be the link, which is why you see Wikipedia and the news websites, which have these really informative, contextual, good quality links throughout their website. So these spiders need to follow these links. These spiders will follow them eventually through to your website once you have it built and it's live. And then that is when Google and the other search engines will start showing it in its own index. And therefore, when somebody searches for a key phrase or your brand. So how does a search engine store and retrieve all of that content over time? So in the process of indexing, it's basically storing that content into this big, massive file of facts of trillions of different results. Search engines store that content and then they serve them in huge databases from which are fetched whenever one of those relevancy signals are ticked as a tick box. When a user searches a phrase, Google then goes to check that full index and tries to analyze the previous relevancy, as well as the frequency of keywords and synonyms used against that target web page, and the links pointing at it and what those links are saying about it, and then it will display the search results. And it's obviously a lot more complex than that. There are over 300 rules in Google's search engine algorithm, and they are being updated every single day, like I mentioned earlier. So Google's algorithm looks at the pages and the ranks and then orders them in what it believes is the most relevant results to get a transaction. So how does a search engine rank websites? So I'm going to quickly dive into that, and then I'm going to hand over to Olivia for the last view and then help you guys with some questions as well near the end. And we'll open up the floor. We'll allow you all to ask some questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can throughout the session. So ranking is the process of prioritizing that content. So that rule base, and there's some really clever little things that you can look back on. If you search the periodic table of search engine factors, there's a really nerdy, beautifully presented display of what the SEO community have found to be impactful areas to pursue in SEO. Now, there are hundreds of rules, but some of those rules may only have a 0.2% weight on influence, whereas others could have up to 15 to 20% influence per rule. So there's obviously better ways that you can focus your time and energy to deliver a much more promising ROI than chasing red herrings. So the algorithm looks at all of these hundreds of different factors, each with a different assigned weight or value over time. And once again, this is a constantly moving target. The search engine orders these results by the pages that will be the best answer to the user's query. And that is typically based on loads of historic, years and years and years of historic data of analyzing where somebody clicked after they clicked on HDTV, what are they searching for next? And then what are they searching for? So what they're trying to do is bring that third search through to the first search if a high enough quantity of people are all going on to search the same phrase. So it's then going to bring that forward. We had this recently with a juice cleanse business. Now, if you search juice cleanse on Google, this business in question wasn't ranking, but the top ranking results were 5 reasons to do a juice cleanse, or top 5 ways to do a juice cleanse. And they are very conversational articles. And that's because Google has analyzed over the years that actually nobody is looking to transact and buy at that search phrase. Where they're looking to buy and transact is that juice cleanse delivery. So they're going to be delivering more e-commerce driven solutions and websites at that search, rather than presenting those results at that search phrase. So it's very much, it's pointless trying to optimize for a phrase where Google is battling against you from day one, saying, no, we're not delivering that because that's not right for our customers. And this is what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to make Google's customers happy, not your own. Yours comes secondary. What you need to focus on first is making sure Google is happy with the user experience and the quality of the results that you're delivering to its own customers. So the most important factor is quality and relevancy. It is not just building up loads of low-level backlinks pointing to your website, or how many times I can shove my keyword in my homepage. It's down to delivering high-quality search results in a relevant and timely manner. Over to you, Olivia.
Hello. So I'm just going to finish off with a few more slides here, but if anyone's got any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll spend a good amount of time doing a Q&A at the end. So the next question, which we get asked a lot, is why is my site not showing up in the search results? Very common. There's a few different reasons for this, and this is why SEO sort of comes into play here. Often it could be that you've got a brand new website and it hasn't actually been crawled by Google yet. So what we were talking about earlier in terms of the crawling and indexing, when you create a website, it won't just go straight live onto Google search engine. Google needs to crawl the site, and then it needs to index the site first and index it and store the site in its database essentially. So if you've got a brand new site, it won't necessarily show up in Google straight away. And also it could be that it's a new page. So if you have a new site and your new page isn't showing up in Google, that could also be the same reason. External links and internal links as well. So in order for Google to crawl and index sites, they need to follow links. If there aren't any links from other sites going into your site, that could be a reason that you're not ranking. And then also if you don't have any internal links. Internal links are links from your website to other pages on your website. External links are links from other websites, so different websites, not your website, to your website, backlinks as they call it. Then the other thing is that this can get quite technical, and it's not something that business owners like yourselves would necessarily need to understand, but often there could be code on your site that can be blocking search engines from crawling and showing your website. So that's where you would need SEO experts to come into play and help make sure that you're not blocking your site from being crawled and shown in Google by search engines. The other thing is your site being penalized by Google. So a lot of, I think we spoke in a previous session about black hat SEO tactics. So these are tactics that used to work many years ago in SEO, things like buying backlinks, putting copy on your site, keyword stuffing, so getting your keyword and, for example, listing it as many times as possible on your site to try and rank. There's quite a few different things that can get you penalized by Google, which basically just means that Google says, no, not showing your site on search results. We don't like your website, you're not trustworthy. And that can take quite a while to recover from. So that's another thing that can be shown. There's a platform called Google Search Console, and you can, if you have that set up, you can have a look in there to see if you've been penalized by Google under the manual actions section. And then also, finally, you have broken pages. So often you'll see that when you go onto a website, you'll reach a page that says, sorry, this page doesn't exist, or 404, or broken page, and you won't get to the page you're expecting to get to. If your site has a lot of broken pages, then it's not going to be indexed by Google. It's important to make sure that if you want to delete a page from your website, you don't just go and necessarily delete it, because that page could have authority. So it's important to put a redirect in, and a redirect is just where you say, I don't want this page on my site anymore. So any links going to this URL should go to this new URL. And that's something that Nettle would do for you as well. So easy steps to improve indexing. So we've gone through what crawling, indexing, and ranking is. There's quite a few things that you can do, quite technical things. This is as well as sort of having content on your site and making sure you're optimized for the right keywords. But the first thing that you can do is submit a sitemap. And a sitemap is simply, if you imagine a map, it's simply a map that tells Google or a search engine all the pages that are on your website and how important they are and how often the search engine should be crawling your website. So most sitemaps will be accessible from the URL of your website, and then it would be .xml sitemap. And WordPress and most content management systems have like an easy plugin or setup to enable sitemaps to not be something complex that you need to set up. And then you submit your sitemap to Google Search Console, and it can be automatically submitted as well. Then using internal links, so I spoke about that previously. So if you have imagine you've got a home page and 10 or 20 other pages on your site, what you need to do is make sure you're linking from your home page to other important pages, from the main navigation at the top of the site to other important pages, from the footer to your important pages, and then when you write blog articles, for example, and post them on the site, you're also linking between different pages that are relevant. And also making sure that if you have any broken pages or broken links, that they are fixed. It's quite an easy thing to do. You could either use either the Nettle tools or Nettle SEO people will fix this for you. And then also there's tools online that you can use to find broken links. But this is something that is formed as part of your SEO package. And then you can also ask Google to crawl URLs. So if you change a page on your website and you want that to be indexed in Google quite quickly, we often find that customers say, well, I've changed this site, but when I go to the page from Google, it's still exactly the same. That's normally because Google has basically kept a version of your page in its index and hasn't crawled the site again to find that new changed version of your page. So in that tool that I was talking about called Google Search Console, there's a thing called inspection tool where you can basically put the URL of your page in, and you can ask Google to recrawl that and re-index it in Google. A couple of other things. So there's something called a robots.txt file, which is essentially just a file on your website that it gives instructions and directives to search engines on what to do. This is very technical, but it's essentially just you want to make sure that your robots.txt file is not telling Google not to index your site or any other search engines. I don't expect everyone to be able to understand what that is or be able to create one, but it is something that will help improve indexing. So if your site isn't showing up in Google, it would be worth saying, can you please check my robots.txt file to see if that's the issue? And then updating old content and publishing fresh content. This is one of the biggest things that we see is that small businesses create a website and then just kind of leave it, or write a blog post and then leave it and don't publish anything new on their site. One of the ways that Google finds your website is through links and seeing what you're doing. And if you're publishing new content on the site, they'll realize that your site is active, your business is live, and it's not just an old website that no one uses or no one visits. And another way is also sharing your content on social media and to anyone else or everyone else relevant. The more that you can do to be sharing your content or sharing anything on your website with different people or different relationships that you have, suppliers, get listed on their websites, have your social channels that are relevant to you, and make sure you're posting things on there often. Okay, so that's me. So should we go to questions now? Hopefully that wasn't too technical. This is a bit more difficult than some of the previous sessions we've done.
Yeah, and obviously if any of you have any questions which you want to ask, then feel free to ask them now, and we'll try to kind of vocalize some responses for you. As well as if you want us to show you anything, we're more than happy to share our screens. If you want to send us a website to have a look at and give you some feedback on what an issue might be, then feel free to ask. We do have a question from Helen Kirkby regarding would a link from LinkedIn or similar count as an external link? Yes, absolutely. Social links are a really, really quick and easy way, providing that your social media profile is set to be indexed by search engines. If it is, then having any link will be followed by Google, who are regularly who are screening each one of these social networks for new links to index in its own web. So yeah, absolutely. Social media links are a really useful way to get a website indexed faster. We've got another one from Pollyanna Stringer. So if I upload a post to my Instagram, which then pulls through into the bottom widget on my website, does this count as an update to my website? Yeah, I mean, in one essence, yes, because the links are going to be followed through. It does depend on the widget box that you use, because you're putting in almost like an iframe embed. So whether or not it's actually pulling through, or if there's an RSS feed pulling the content through, that would have to be discovered. But I would strongly recommend just updating the website as frequently as you can. If you have like an Instagram page that you're updating regularly, then see if maybe once a week you could do a summary of that Instagram page in one blog article. It doesn't have to be like paragraphs of text. It's just got to be something useful and meaningful. And if you're sharing them with your followers on Instagram, it's probably going to be useful and meaningful. So Hannah asks as well, Olivia, this one's for you. So how important is using tags on both pages and in blogs? And do you benefit from using an index page map? Thank you. Big smile from Yorkshire. Hey, Yorkshire.
How important is using tags on both index pages and blogs? I would say it's more important. So using tags is more important from my perspective, from a user perspective. So if someone goes on your website, onto your blog, and they can see what articles or what blogs are tagged up as what topic. I genuinely, for small websites, it's not as much of an issue, but you don't need tagged pages indexed in Google. It's better to just have all the blog articles indexed in Google and all your pages rather than your tagged pages, if that makes sense. And do you benefit from using index page map? Index page map, thank you. And does that mean sitemap?
I think so.
Yeah, so you benefit from having a sitemap. It doesn't mean your site wouldn't necessarily rank without a sitemap, but every site should have a sitemap because it helps Google understand the structure of your website as well and how often to crawl it.
And also, if you don't have direct links to all of your pages, from which some of your websites might have quite complex hierarchies, then this is a way of telling Google where all of your URLs are hiding and how they're bundled together. So in future sessions and in a couple of previous ones, we have discussed content silos and creating content silos. Your silos should be mimicked against your sitemap. So if your primary keyword is then categorized and then there's a subsector of pages underneath, then that's ideal. I tell you what, it's a really good exercise, possibly to show you all what a sitemap looks like so that you can have a look for yourself. So let me see if I can get this going up. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen, everybody, that classic phrase of the day these days. You should see here, this is Nettle's sitemap. So this is telling Google when to crawl each one of these individual areas. And you can actually drill into these. So this website in particular has multiple sitemaps for the different locations where Nettle operates as a business. And this is something that you can create if you have a WordPress website, which many of you will. You can create these in Yoast themselves. So it's not just one sitemap, it's a sitemap of a sitemap. It's a bit like going down the rabbit hole, so there's always another area to explore. But we'll go into the page one. So if we drill into this individual sitemap, we can see every single location of Nettle. We can see how this then drills down again if there are any sub pages. And we can also tell Google within here how frequently we want them to come and recrawl each one of those pages. So obviously having a home page will be a lot more useful having this page crawled more frequently than it would a individual location which might not have any updates. So this is really a great way to list out every page within a website and analyze how they're all linking together. There's some really good sitemap visualization tools as well. So if we search sitemap visualization, let's see if we can just find a free one just to show you quickly. So once you map it out, and this may take a couple of minutes, probably not the best example because it's such a big old website. Oh, look at that. I like it when it goes faster. Come on. And then what we should be presented with is like a spider diagram branching out how each one of these pages corresponds to the main category or main page within that subject itself. This seems to be stopping at the last minute. Yeah, I love a good demo.
I think we've got a question just while you're doing that. We've got a question about what is readability. You can answer that question in a few ways, but readability is essentially you need to ensure your content is readable by who your audience is and anyone on a web page. So for example, if someone's on a mobile, it needs to be readable on mobile. One piece of advice I'd always give is to look at your site on mobile, and if you've just got big blocks of text, just paragraphs and paragraphs of text, not breaking it up at all, that's not very readable. It's not a good user experience. So to improve readability, you can use the headings, so H1, H2, H3, which breaks up written text. Also use like bullet points, images, anything to improve readability. And readability is also, there's a tool that you can use called Grammarly or Hemingway. And basically you can put your content or your written content on your page in there, and it tells you how easy it is to read that content. And if it's not easy to read, if you have like long, complex sentences or things where there's grammar issues, that is bad readability.
Absolutely. And you can see here as well a quick impression, a basic impression of what a sitemap structure looks like. So in this scenario, you've got the products and then product 1, product 2, and then subcategories relating to that product. There are much nicer ways to visualize it. You can have these really complex, like as a big data nerd, this kind of thing really excites me. It doesn't take much, clearly, and you can see how everything stems out. And this is you creating content silos which give your prospective customers the results of what they're looking for as soon as possible. And if you bring this back to also ask.com, which is what I was talking about earlier, and we go, HDTV, something that all of you should have a play around with, because this can very much create your content calendar for you. You can see that actually HDTV, it's a lot better and a lot cheaper for you to advertise and to create content around what is better, UHD or LED. Creating this content will actually end up making you eventually rank for the phrase HDTV, but you're more likely to get conversions from these phrases than you are for trying to optimize or paying PPC for a phrase like this. Let's go back into a couple of extra questions. We've got quite a few coming through. Is there a tool to check your website for any broken links? Error 404. Yeah, I mean, you can use Search Console. You can also use a series of different Google Chrome extensions, which also serve the same job. So you can run a lighthouse audit against your website. I'll pop that in the message box for you in a minute so that you can
you can also just type into Google, find broken links on a website, and the top 3 results will probably have tools which you can literally just play with a couple of tools. You can just put your website in there, and it will just say to you error 404 and tell you how many pages have that.
Most SEO like features or errors have free tools available online. You just have to search for that exact tool, and yeah, you'll be surprised about how many SEOs out there are willing to give away some free information in return for maybe trying to give you a sales pitch at some stage. So just be wary of that.
There's a question about blog posts having equal importance as pages. Does length have any effect? So I would say length, in terms of length, yes and no. So depth has an effect. So how much depth your content goes into. So does it cover all of the questions that people ask in related to that topic? So you could have, there's no point having 3,000 words on a page that don't talk about what you're trying to rank for. But if you have 3,000 words that answer the person's first question, and then when you've answered that question, they have another question, you answer that. And so, for example, if you're trying to talk about sweets, are sweets bad for you? And then if you answer that question and then you go into more detail about sweets, then yes, length kind of does have an impact. But you could be, for example, a website that is really authoritative, answers the question really well in 600 words and ranks better than a page with 3,000 words if it doesn't answer the questions. So it's all about matching the intent of what the person searching is looking for. Then in terms of pages and blog posts, so the way that sets out is, I suppose, your pages are your service pages or your product pages. So they should have the most importance in terms of you want them to rank for the keywords that you're trying to rank for the main ones, but your blog posts are there to be able to support that and also rank for some of the low competition, low search volume keywords. So you should also be linking from your blog posts to your product or service pages, to your most important pages.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on. So Hans going to carry on tagging. So good luck on that. Are sitemaps necessary? Small maps, yeah. Small sites, yeah. On all levels, it's actually, I would say, it's part of the algorithms too, in the sense that you need to be trying to follow compliance as much as possible. So having a sitemap and submitting that sitemap is also important. Don't expect a search engine to go and try to find it themselves. You really need to try to point them in the right direction as much as possible. I want to create a website as I'm looking for a challenge. Would you be able to recommend a site for beginners? WordPress. I mean, I self-taught myself how to build on WordPress. There's loads of themes out there that you can do one-click installs on, and then you can modify those themes, which really does speed up development significantly. And then by having a WordPress website, it gives you a lot more flexibility than having a website on Wix or Weebly or anything like that. That's not to discredit those sites. You know, Wix sites are certainly heading in the right direction. But when it comes to the ability to influence things like website speed and security and trying to be agile is really important in SEO. And sadly, Wix and the other site builders don't provide as much as an opportunity to be agile as something like WordPress, which is open source to the whole world to go and learn. And there's tons of free content on YouTube for you to go and learn and to practice, and you can't really break anything. So. What's the name of the tool for showing a sitemap? Mark, if you just go, obviously I failed quite significantly on that. So if you just go ahead and search on Google a sitemap visualization tool and put in your own sitemap, then it will come up with one of those. Or you can use one of the premium tools that we use here at Nettle, which is something called Screaming Frog, which if you really want to get nerdy when it comes to data, then Screaming Frog is like one of the best ones. A good exercise is to crawl your competitors' websites and you can visualize their sitemap so you can see what content they're creating. So you can put in Disney and you can see every single page on Disney's websites and how they're hierarching that content. And you can do that against any website at all, even the biggest ones in the world. There's no stopping you. And then once you know what they're doing, you can reverse engineer it and try to make it better and more relevant, which will give you a head start when it comes to SEO. Yeah, that's a big part of SEO is like copying, analyzing, and making better.
One thing I'd recommend as well is once you get your sitemap, so once you've got your sitemap in front of you, you could almost copy all of the URLs in your sitemap, put that into like an Excel document or a document, and then map your keywords against those URLs. So if you've got keywords that you're trying to target, be like, so what page am I trying to target this keyword on? Now that's obviously a job for SEO and Nettle people as well, but it's something you could do.
Yeah, so we've got somebody else who said, what is a slug? Well, they're a common garden pest which often eats leaves. But in relating to a website, then so a slug is right. So a slug is typically it's called a slug because of the trail that it leaves behind it, right? So you have cookies and then you have slugs relating to a particular subject. I wouldn't worry too much about it because majority of site builders just do that by default and it's not really going to impact things significantly for you. So I would just focus on creating things like page titles in the correct way, and that means that your slugs will naturally be in the best position, but it's not really something that you have to worry too much about these days. Olivia, anything to add on that? I don't think so.
I mean, the only thing I would add is obviously if you've got a product or a service page, so if you're a hairdresser's in Brighton, you might want to have the slug, which is like the URL, as hairdressers in Brighton, and then also have that as the main heading on the page, just to, I suppose, improve the relevancy and ability to rank locally. So like we saw on Nettle earlier, they have loads of different pages for different areas where they service people and print studios. So you could have the slug could be the name of your service or business or location.
Yeah, and those of you who are kind of interested in analyzing how to create that URL structure effectively, then I would always say the best rule of thumb is to take what your primary service is and your primary target locality, and then use that as your URL descriptor or your slug, and also put that into your page title. It doesn't mean that you have to be like taxis-Birmingham, and then your page title is taxis Birmingham and everything else. Your page title could be something like serving the Birmingham community since 1920. We are the premium option for private hire and taxis. Something like that is absolutely fine. You don't have to like mirror image everything and make it really clunky and not readable. The focus here is to really try to engage with the prospective users, whilst giving clues and hints to Google about what regions you're serving and what areas you're serving. And just to focus on that again for small businesses, because I've been optimizing SMB websites or small, medium-sized business websites for nearly 10 years. And in that scenario, you'd have your primary landing page, but then if you're targeting, once again, taxis in Birmingham, then you might want to talk about the top 10 places to go in Birmingham, because that's relevant. And it's also, you're mentioning places in Birmingham, which Google can relate to Birmingham, which is unique to it. So you might be talking about Cadbury's, and that instantly relates back to it, for example. Or I think it's not Cadbury's in Birmingham, is it?
Yeah, it's Cadbury's factory, yeah.
Good, phew. Whereas obviously if you're talking about Birmingham, then you're talking about Bristol Zoo, then it's going to throw off the index. So you want to be trying to make it a really useful, engaging experience for a prospective customer, or whilst giving Google the material that it wants. And think about how Wikipedia works. Think about how if you search silverback gorilla in Wikipedia, you know what, I'll share my screen now, and we're going slightly off topic, but I think you will find it useful. Silverback gorilla, and I hope this works. I haven't been searching silverback gorillas that frequently. Here we go. Apparently I have, because it's highlighted. So we're going to click into gorilla on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia has no bias when it comes to Google search engines. Well, what it does exceptionally well is a really fast, lean user experience, which doesn't have loads of vanity pictures and everything else. It's just trying to deliver content in the fastest possible way. And then it has all of these internal linking. And I recognize it doesn't say anywhere here, click here, or find out more, or anything like that. This is all descriptive, contextual words linking, and all of these sub-subjects make it authoritative for gorilla, because it knows that gorillas are apes, and they live in the forest, and they are from Africa, and that they came from humans. So Google already knows all of that information. So what it's actually trying to find out is who has all of that core information relating to that subject. And that's the same as if you're butchers, if you're hairdressers, you want to be talking about bob cuts and skin fades, and all the rest of that information all makes you authoritative for hairdressers. So what people need to stop doing is stop just putting in the same keywords all of the time, and start putting your expertise as small business owners into your website and actually showing that. You know, it's no longer sufficient just to have a brochure website and say, hey, I've only got a 2-page website, but I wanted to rank top on Google. It's like, well, no, you're not going to, because you're not adding any value to the internet. If you want to rank and you want to see this as a really, really profitable exercise, which it is, you know, this is ultimately how companies like Gymshark reach billion-pound valuations, is by focusing on SEO first, and focusing on influencers and leveraging influencers for their ability to rank and get ahead of really massive competitors in the world. And it's hugely possible for any business on here to outrank Amazon or outrank any of these huge major organizations if they follow a formula and stick to it and they persevere. I know because I've done it quite a few times, and it is very much possible. And you can do that on a shoestring budget just by committing your time and energy towards it. And a really good way for all of you to understand what the potential ROI is from optimizing for search is if you've ever run a ad campaign, a PPC campaign, those keywords that are delivering conversions, which hopefully you would have done some tracking, times that by 4 or 5, and that's what you should be getting if you were ranking organically for that phrase. That should give you a rough indicator of what the output could be if you were ranking top organically for that phrase. And then you look at all of the volume of phrases within PPC, or what are delivering leads and conversions for you, and they are your target keywords. You already know what's going to work, so pursue those ones. And if it's all very long tail phrases from PPC, you know these are the questions I need to be answering within my website to make my website visible. So it's really important to get that strategy locked down.
There's a question here about is having an external blog with a different URL linked to my shop website but on the same relevant topic a no-no compared to an in-site one on the same URL. So Google will see those as both different websites. So the blog that's on a different URL or different site or domain that will be different to the shop website. So if you want to improve the authority of the shop website and show Google that you're posting relevant content, it's better to have a blog on the shop website.
Absolutely. And I think there's another one there around sitemaps, and if you need to update a new one every single time. No, you don't, because the very nature of a sitemap is that it's telling the search engine to come back in a week or in 2 weeks or in a day or in an hour to come and check what's new. So it already has those core pages, so it will naturally find and navigate the next ones. So
the only thing you can do is if you have changed something on your site and you want it to Google to recrawl that page as quickly as possible, you can use the URL inspection tool in Google Search Console once you've got that set up, and you can put the page in there and it will say, it will come up, Google will crawl it and it will come up with indexed and submitted, and then you can click something that says, I think it's like recrawl or force a crawl, and you can basically force Google to crawl it quicker than it might do with the sitemap if you wanted to. But you don't need to do that every time. It's just if you've changed something significant on your website and you want it to show up in the search results quicker.
Great. Well, I think that's pretty much everyone's questions. If anybody else has any more, then feel free to leave a little note in the chat box. Or if you're on video, put your hand up and we'll unmute you and you can actually physically ask us a question if your fingers are as weary as mine. If not, then we're going to run another session. Hey, Lee.
Yeah, sorry, I had a customer come in and I had to disappear. Do apologize.
Well, I'm not redoing it all, Lee.
Can I, no, can we, are these available for watching later? They are.
Yeah, I hope so. I think Olivia clicked record. So
yeah, it is.
Great. So yeah, this should all be good for you guys to watch back later. Obviously, we have a collection of other ones. If you haven't joined us in previous weeks, we're going to carry on doing these in the weeks to come. It is a subject that never ends. Hopefully, you will get lots of value from these sessions. You know, myself and Olivia have both been working within agencies, but also Olivia's been working on what we call the client side of things, so working within a large organization on the other side of working with agencies as well. And hopefully these don't come across like sales pitches to you guys. And you know, if there is value in you inquiring with the Nettle team around SEO, then obviously it's something that we would say is a worthwhile activity, because the key thing you have to understand is that you can't just throw a couple of £100 a month at this and it's just done. Like, you need to be owning and adopting some of this yourself. And then the things that Nettle do should be the things that you can't do. So it should be the technical challenges, speed optimization, the server configuration, and all of that technical stuff. Whereas we can never replace your expertise in your subjects, whether it be hypnosis or whether it be graphic design or whether it be car hire or taxis. You know those industries, they're your bread and butter. SEO is ours. So
yeah. And also, so not next week, the week after, that session is on keyword and phrase research. So that might be really useful if you want to understand a bit more about how to use keywords on your website, what are the right keywords and what different keywords that real people use and what they mean.
Absolutely. And one last question we're going to pick up here, which is from Richard. So how popular is voice search and how do search engines work differently for voice searches? So it's pretty much that long tail analysis once again. So we are seeing a huge increase in long tail questions being asked to search engines. And we're probably heading to a realm and a world where keyboards will probably not be as relevant in the next 10 years. If at all, keyboards will be seen as something a bit of the past, and we'll probably be using a voice a hell of a lot more as the accuracy increases, and it's getting very close to a tipping point right now. But obviously, we're now starting to see breakthroughs with things like Neuralink, which will allow eventually people to think of something and have that presented to them, which really does change everything then.
With voice search, I think it's one of those things within SEO that it's definitely becoming more prominent, and Google said that by 2020, 50% of searches will be voice search. I don't think that's quite right at the moment, but what's important, I think, to understand is that to get your SEO right on your site first before being a company that can optimize for voice queries. There's not a lot of data out there yet in specifically what queries are voice search queries. It's a lot in terms of what people are asking their Amazon Echoes and their Google Homes and things like that. It's not necessarily all searches. So don't think of voice search as the biggest thing for your small business at the moment, I would say.
Yeah, correct. 100% correct. Thank you, Olivia. And if anybody has any questions, then feel free to go and message your local Nettle studio or go and pester them, because we also train every studio owner on our SEO years of experience. So hopefully that translates to more experienced studio owners so that you can go in and have a coffee and a drink and chat to these people who are eventually going to surpass our knowledge, I'm sure. So that is all. Thank you very much for joining, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.